Hey guys, my name's Adam and I'm here with the first English video of our SHSAT channel. And today's topic for English is going to be main ideas. So before we get into this, I just want to bring up some key points and then we can go into some practice problems. So my first key point is look at key parts of the passage. For main ideas, you don't really have to be reading the entire passage to understand the key point, right? The main idea. You should be reading the first and last paragraphs of the passage, as well as the first and last sentences of each of the other paragraphs, because that's usually enough to give you the general idea of that passage. So just don't waste your time on the other parts unless there is a specific question, right? And obviously there are going to be times when it's going to say like, oh, go to paragraph number 2, look at this sentence, right? And in that case, you have to look at that part of the text more closely. But generally, you shouldn't be reading everything. That just wastes time. My second key point is don't pick something that draws conclusions. And what I mean by that is if an answer choice says that the main idea of a passage was that someone was fast, well, then the passage has to say that that person was fast. If the passage doesn't explicitly build that point that the person was fast, right, then that's not the main idea of the passage. So you should be seeing the key idea, the main point of the passage very clearly in the answer choice. And my third key point is don't get caught up in the complex language. A lot of times when we see a word, we come across a word that we don't really know, we get scared. We're like, oh my God, what are we gonna do, right? But a lot of times you can figure that word out using the context, using the sentence around it, right? You don't even need to know that word. And the people who design this test know that, right? They know that you won't know every word that you see on here. To be honest, oftentimes you don't even need to know what the word means. Especially for like main idea, when you just need to understand the overall feel of the passage. A word here or there won't ruin it. So don't get worried if you don't understand a word. Now, with that being said, let's go to our first example. Okay, so I'm going to read out loud and underline and annotate, and then we'll go through this together. For all the questions, and this applies to everything, if you ever want to try and do it on your own, then pause the video, try, and then, yeah. Okay. The following text is adapted from Robert Louis Stevenson's 1888 book, The Black Arrow, A Tale of the Two Roses. One afternoon, the bell upon Tunstall Moat House was heard ringing at an unaccustomed hour. Okay, heard ringing, unaccustomed hour. Far and near, in the forest and in the fields along the river, people began to desert their labors, and hurry towards the sound. By the bridge, there was a stone cross upon a knoll, and here a group had collected, half a dozen women and one tall fellow in a russet smock, discussing what the bell betided. An express had gone through the hamlet an hour before, and drunk a pot of ale in the saddle, not daring to dismount for the hurry of his errand. But he had been ignorant himself of what was forward, and only bore sealed letters to Sir Oliver Oates, who kept the moat house in the master's absence. Right? So we understand the main point, and the words I highlighted are kind of the main points of each sentence. So, and actually I just want to bring up one quick thing here. For example, it says here, an express, right? I assume that most of you probably don't know what an express is, right? This isn't a word that I think the test makers expect you to know either, right? So just so you know, an express is a messenger, right? But you can figure that out from the context of the sentence, right? Because it says, had gone through the hamlet an hour before, he was on a saddle, not daring to dismount, right? So he's obviously riding something like a horse. And it says that he bore sealed letters. So someone riding a horse fast, right, with sealed letters, that's a messenger. So even without knowing what that word means, you can understand the context. Okay, so now let's look at the answer choices. A, the church bell has called people together to learn happy news from a stranger. So this is a trick. This sounds like a pretty good answer choice, but there is a key point here. It says happy. We don't know if the news is happy. We don't know if the news is sad. We just know that there is news, right? So we can't assume anything. It wasn't clearly and explicitly stated in the passage. So that's why A is wrong, right? B, A messenger has brought news that is yet unknown, yet important enough for all the local people to be called together. That sounds pretty good, right? The news is unknown, but everyone was called together because it was important. So I'm going to underline that and save that. Now let's move on, and we'll come back to that if we think it's the right answer. C. The bell upon Tunstad Moat House is broken, causing it to ring at an unknown time. A group of people gather together to discuss the issue and the unknown solution. Okay, so this is wrong because the bell isn't broken, right? The bell was working. The bell was ringing to call people over, to gather people together, right? It's what the bell had betided, right? So there was a reason to ring the bell. It wasn't that it was broken, right? So that's why C is wrong. D. A sealed letter has arrived, causing the messenger to ring the bell at Tunstad Moat House and bring together all the people. Okay, this is like A. We don't know that the messenger rang the bell, right? We don't know who rang the bell. It doesn't explicitly say who rang the bell. So we can't assume that. So that's why D is wrong as well. And so by process of elimination, the only correct answer can be B. Okay, so now let's go to a longer question, and this is more likely like what you're going to see on the real SAT. On the SHSAT. And here, what we're going to do is we're just going to take the first and last sentence of each paragraph, except for the first, last paragraph, and whatever paragraphs we may need to focus on. But before we get in, especially for these bigger passages, what I would recommend is for you to read the questions first. So let's read it. Paragraph 7 contributes to the development of a central idea of the passage by, right? So we know that our focus is going to be on paragraph 7, right? So knowing that, when we get in, we're going to look a bit more closely at paragraph number 7. Okay. In 1926, an editor at the London Daily News predicted that Gertrude Ederle, an American swimmer with 18 world records and 3 Olympic medals, would fail in her attempt to swim across the English Channel. Okay, so we can underline that. He claimed that even the most uncompromising champion of the rights and capacities of women must admit that in the contests of physical skill, speed and endurance, they must remain forever the weaker sex. Yet, at only 19 years old, Ederle not only became the first woman to accomplish this feat, she also broke the men's record by 2 hours. Gertrude Ederle's triumphant swim across the English Channel was a testimony to her determination, innovative swimming, spirit, and passion for swimming. So this is kind of our thesis statement here, right? That last sentence. And that's usually how it is. The last sentence of the first paragraph, the introductory paragraph, is going to be your thesis statement. Okay, so now let's keep going. Crossing the English Channel is a daunting task for any swimmer, right? That's the first sentence. Now let's read the last sentence. Stinging jellyfish, seaweed, and floating debris from shipwrecks and lost cargoes present added hazards. So we get that this is talking about like challenges, right? That people face when they swim, right? And you know what? We'll say general challenges because it isn't specific to her. So general challenges, right? Let's keep going. For decades, the channel's perils have defeated countless swimmers. Okay. Let's read the last sentence. Ederle knew that if she did not complete the challenge this time, she might never get the opportunity to set this record because a rival female swimmer was preparing to make her second attempt at the crossing as well. So we understand that this is about other swimmers, right? Other swimmers. Right? Now, let's keep going. To prepare for the marathon swim, Ederle found ways to improve her equipment. That's a big paragraph. Let's read the last sentence. Unlike the cumbersome typical bathing suit, this silk invention weighed little and allowed for easy movement. So we understand that this is about like equipment and new technologies and stuff that she used, right? So we can just label this as equipment. On August 6th, 1926, Ederle waded into the channel near Cape Gris-Nez, France. Let's read the last sentence. Using a new overhand stroke called the American crawl, Ederly eventually settled into a steady pace, briskly breaking through waves. So we understand that this is kind of like the start, right? Start of her swim. Start of swim, right? And just by like giving one or two words or like a very few amount of words to each paragraph, when I jump back to this text after reading some questions and answering, I instantly know where everything is. So this is very helpful, right? To kind of set yourself up for the questions later on. Okay, throughout Ederly's swim, 2 tugboats accompanied her. Okay, so we see 2 tugboats, now last sentence. Using a net, her coach also passed her baby bottles of broth for nourishment. So we understand this is kind of like the aid she got, the help she got from other people. So we can write like help, right? What she got along the way. Now, this is paragraph 7, so we're going to read everything. For hours, Ederly swam, dodging debris with an amused smile. However, as she neared the English shore, a sudden fierce storm erupted. The tides and waves forced Ederly backwards, and she fought the stubborn swells for several hours. The salty water caused her tongue to swell and inflamed her ears. Yet, Ederly felt indescribably happy as she churned through the sea. Finally, as she neared the English shore, the storm abated and the tide turned. No longer fighting against her, the sea pushed her towards the shore and victory. Okay, so we get that this is kind of about the end of her swim, right? Storm / end of swim, right? This is kind of the climax of the story. After 14 hours and 31 minutes, Ederly, on wobbly legs, stepped onto the English shore. The waiting crowd roared, honked their automobile horns, blasted their tugboat whistles, and set off flares that flashed in the sky. Ederly had swum into history. So this is about back home, right? When Ederly returned, sorry, this is not back home. This is like victory, I feel like would be a better way to describe this, right? So let's just quickly fix that. Victory. And let's read the last one. We're going to read everything here. When Ederly returned to New York, she received a parade where thousands of people shouted, "Trudy!" Not only were everyday American citizens proud of Ederly, but also she inspired them to be more active. Over the next few years, more than 60,000 people credited her with motivating them to earn their American Red Cross swimming certificates. Gertrude Ederly's accomplishment proved to the world that with determination and passion, it was possible for a person to achieve his or her goals. Right? So this is kind of like, this is again the thesis basically. And this is like back home. This should be back home. Okay, now that we have this, let's go look at the answer choices. So E, illustrating that Ederly's physical strength and mental fortitude allowed her to stay focused on her goal. So paragraph 7 talks about the storm, right, and how she persevered through it. So I guess this seems like a decent answer. Let's underline it and we'll come back. F, conveying that Ederly pushed herself to the edge of her physical capabilities in order to complete the swim. Well, while it does say that, right, it does say that it was very hard for her, it doesn't necessarily say that she pushed herself to her physical capabilities, right? That's something we're kind of exaggerating, assuming it isn't very clearly said here, right? So because of that, we can't confidently make this claim. G, highlighting the impact the severe weather had on Ederly's emotions during her swim. Okay, so that is what paragraph 7 says, right? It says, indescribably happy, right? It is how the kind of the storm affected her, right? She's indescribably happy as she churned through the sea. And it shows how she's happy, she's persevering through the storm, right? But that is only paragraph 7. It's asking for paragraph 7 in the context of the entire story, right? So the entire story isn't just about her going through the storm, it's about her going through her entire journey, right? So G is wrong because it doesn't just matter about the impact, whether it matters, like the entire story arc matters. So now let's look at H, emphasizing the surge of emotions Ederly felt as she came closer to achieving a personal goal. So is there a surge of emotions? Yes, she feels, at first she feels amused, right? Then she feels indescribably happy. She no longer fighting against, she feels victorious, right? There are stubborn swells, fierce, there's a lot of like adjectives here and emotions and feelings, right? So this seems like a pretty good answer. Now, how are we going to differentiate between the two before we just use process of elimination? The reason that this is better is because it connects more to the overall theme, right? Physical strength and mental fortitude allowed her to stay focused on her goal, right? That is what matters, right? That is what the paragraph, the overall theme of the passage is, but it isn't shown that much in paragraph number 7, right? That's the overall trend of the passage. But paragraph 7 doesn't really demonstrate that, actually. I would probably pick a different paragraph for that, right? So because of that, H, right? This H applies both to paragraph number 7 and to the main development of the story, which is why H is the right answer. Okay, so thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And, if you have a topic you want us to cover, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to comment down below and we'll take a look and maybe we'll make a video about it. So thank you so much for watching, and yeah, have a good day.